friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. In this repeat episode from our archives, first published in 2019, my guest is my friend Mike Weinberg. Mike's a consultant, a speaker, author of 3 excellent books, including his latest book, which we're going to talk about in this episode, titled Sales Truth, Debunk the Myths, Apply Powerful Principles, Win More New Sales. Mike and I always have a great time talking about sales, so I warn you, this episode runs a bit longer than normal because once we got started talking, it was hard to stop. So we're going to look at some of the popular myths about sales that, sort of echoing around the echo chamber of LinkedIn these days. We'll also dive deep into some of the key themes in Mike's book, including why sellers need to be more discriminating about the sales advice they follow, how to avoid being stuck in the procurement pit, and how to work with procurement to get the outcomes that you need. So all that and much, much more. Before we get to Mike, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could also give us your feedback about how we're doing in the form of a review. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it with Mike Weinberg. Mike, welcome back to the show.
Andy, it's good to be back here.
It's always fun to have you here. So, we're here to sort of celebrate the publication of your latest book titled Sales Truths, Debunk the Myths, Apply Powerful Principles, Win More New Sales. So, the first part of the book is a bit of a, what do I want to call the first part of the book? I don't want to call it a rant, but I mean, it's that doesn't give it enough justice. So it's a critique, let's say.
Part rant, part expose, part righteous anger, honestly, just from what I'm seeing. So I felt like someone had to say it,
Yeah, well, I would go as far as expose, because if it was expose, you would have name to name. So you were very careful. Not though we could, it was sort of like one of these fictional novels. You could sort of tell who you're talking about. But so you sort of lead off the book saying, hey, you have to be wary of nouveau experts and false teachers. That's a quote from one of your chapter titles. So as I was reading the first part of the book, sort of thinking to myself, okay, well, this is a section probably a lot of people wish they had written. So who are these people, these false experts?
Well, they're everywhere. And I was attempting to be respectful in not naming names. It's more the movement and the nonsense that I'm angry at, not the individuals per se, or the medium, when we'll get into that, social selling in particular. But, what compelled me, Andy, was really simple. What I was reading online from those nouveau experts, particularly on LinkedIn, I think that's because LinkedIn is the cesspool for sales advice.
It is.
There's no barrier to entry. All you need is a name and a login and a keyboard, and you are a self-proclaimed thought leader. So what I was reading on LinkedIn from some relatively popular sales experts about what it takes to succeed in sales today was very different from what I was seeing with my own eyes in real companies where I'm consulting, training, coaching, speaking, etc. So over the last few years, my anger and frustration and concern just built to the place where I said, I got to call this out. I'm going to quote these people using their own words from their own posts of the nonsense, this garbage. It's pathetic what passes for sales advice today. And I'm going to compare that to what I'm seeing. And that's where the 2 parts of the book. Part 1 is, here's what I'm hearing the experts say. And then part 2 is, here are the best practices I'm really seeing to create new opportunities, to advance them through the pipe, to own your process, to not get commoditized, right? And what are the very best sellers doing today? So that's kind of what drove me. And the nonsense I'm mostly addressing in part 1 that you asked about is the message that's very prevalent, which is everything in sales has changed and nothing that used to work still works. In fact, if you dare deploy traditional methods like prospecting, like the telephone, you're not only stupid and going to fail, but you're a Luddite from the dark ages, and we should ridicule you for even trying. And that's where I had to draw the line and go, stop. And I'll wrap this part by saying my anger and my concern comes out of the fact that it's typically the gullible and weaker seller that falls for the nonsense.
Sure, looking for the quick fix.
The easy button. Yeah, it's like me. I'm fat because I eat too many carbs and don't have enough cardio exercise, right? Like, let's be honest. But when people online start preaching, well, you eat all you want, and just if you just tweet and blog and put out great content, they'll run to you when they're 57% through their buying process. That's not true. And that's where I just felt like I had to address it.
Yeah, well, and that's my assessment is of a lot of the advice that's online is that, yeah, it appeals to people that want sort of a quick fix, but it's also disproportionately focused at the top of the funnel. And so what I don't see is, and this is part of the reason I started the Sales House and the work that I do, is that, yeah, it's not about selling. It's about lead gen. And I think that one of the big holes that exists for many sales organizations is they invest a disproportionate amount of their time and effort on top of funnel. And even if they have opportunities, they really do a really, excuse my French, but piss poor job of getting to the point where they can actually win. And we have, this whole segment of the SaaS segment that these companies are subsisting on like 20% win rates, which, as I said when I was keynoting to an audience of SaaS sellers a couple weeks ago, that really sucks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny you brought up the funnel and the stages. I was just listening to get back in the mood and drink some more Andy Paul content. And I listened to just one of your recent episodes with that gentleman from overseas where you were talking about the middle of the funnel and how important it is there. His name is escaping me. But Steve
Norman.
Yeah. Boy, and his content and his book, I know he's from overseas, so it should have a lot more. His book has a solid content in there. It should be more popular than it is. Yeah. So I applaud you for having him on. I really enjoyed that. Win rates are a big deal, and we could have a whole conversation about that.
But it seems like people aren't really focused on it, though. And this is the part that drives me nuts. Is I'll talk to CROs of prominent companies that are growing quickly, and I talk to them about their growth rates. It's come to the point where basically they're just playing the odds, right? If I get enough crap into the top of the funnel, I know a certain percentage is going to flow through. And I say, well, what are you doing to increase your win rates? What are you doing to be more effective at discovery, qualification, the things in the middle of the funnel that I believe make the difference between winning and losing, and there's no attention being paid, or very scant attention being paid to it.
Yeah, boy, it's bad everywhere. Because I have in my client base, it's worse the other way. It's worse where they're ignoring the top of the funnel. Mm-hmm. So, but I see it both. What I get frustrated where you're going is the lack of ownership of a sound sales process. And I'm relatively agnostic about process. You approach it a lot of different ways, but I see this demo first, right? Like we go in pitch mode, especially in the software world, and everyone's being evaluated on how many demos. So we don't do good qualification, and we don't know what questions to ask, and we don't understand the prospect's current state or desired future state going into the demo, right? Mm-hmm. I read Keenan's book, right, Gap Selling, and he does a great job articulating. I love what he said there. He says, you know what? No discovery, no demo. And I'm like, standing freaking ovation. So there's the lack of ownership of the process there. And then later on where you're getting commoditized because we have weak sellers that are also doing whatever the prospect asks. I have a SaaS client, and one of their best salespeople is wonderful, but she's also very compliant to everything that the prospect asks because she wants to be likable, and she is likable. But a lot of times when we do everything they ask us, we end up falling into what I call the procurement pit, right? You're just another vendor being put in a box, and you haven't differentiated yourself in your approach. So I don't know if that's where you go, but win rate's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. So we'll get back to win rate, but to your idea about compliance, though, because I think this is one of the real problems. Because certainly what we're seeing relative to the growth of inside sales is largely sort of emanated out of the valley and is spreading into industries other than tech. And as I said, it can be extremely valuable, right? But what I find ironic, especially coming out of the valley with software companies, SaaS companies, is that their sales processes, to the point you made before, is, I've said this before, it's so ironic that these companies who are founded to be disruptive rely on the most compliance, conformity-based selling processes possible, right? And so sellers aren't being given the opportunity to develop their own strengths and skills, develop their own unique sales process, taking advantage of their own strengths. And I think this contributes to the problem.
Yeah, totally. It's a mess. Either you're trying to create cookie cutter people that aren't allowed to sell in their own style, and that's a whole issue, or they're just not aware. Well, I tell you, along similar lines, I'm seeing salespeople that are not aware that you can push back on a prospect. So, I hear you, Let me share with you, however, what we found is better. I need to meet these other people. I need to have these meetings. If we're going to help you sell this internally, if we're going to get you the outcome you want, I need to do my job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not interested in just lining up the ducks and filling in your boxes and doing the dog and pony show. I need to tailor what we're going to present to you and what we're going to come up with based on what I learned. And if I can't get that access, I'm going to consider backing away.
But don't I'm sorry to interrupt, but don't you think that's a problem coming from manager? This idea about the culture that we talked about is that, if I've got this tightly defined linear sales, stage-based sales process with these tightly defined exit criteria, so on and so forth, people aren't going to, there's no incentive to push back, because really what they want to do is check the boxes so they can tell their management, this is what we did.
Yeah, they're being micromanaged, is what you're saying, it through a very rigid process that they've over-engineered.
Right.
So they're trying to get through it. It's funny, I was going to ask you, are you in California or New York? But hearing the siren, I'm like, well, now I know where you are. It's awesome. You're in the city. All I want is a slice of New York pizza when I hear that sound.
Well, get out here. We'll go do it. I forgot to close my windows.
It wouldn't have mattered. It would come through anyway. That's awesome. Yeah.
Sorry about that, audience. Now you know. Secret's out. I'm in New York City today.
Yeah, don't track him down. But you can't find him today because the day this airs he won't be there. So
no, been safe, many places before then. So
yeah.
But yeah, this is I think is and we sort of touched on it in two different ways now. Is that I think that I always contrast this to the way I came up in sales. I worked for big companies. We had processes, but I had managers to say, look, go figure this out, right? The way that works best for you. You don't need to be the same as everybody else. And I was given that freedom and latitude to do it. I was given the rope to hang myself, quite virtually. But I mean, but the thing is, it doesn't happen as much these days because we want people to be clones. But
let's go down that path. Because you're bringing back memories of my early sales managers and even senior executives who mentored me.
Right.
One of my great frustrations, and it's a topic from another book, but where'd the sales mentors go? Where are the managers that take the pride in mentoring and developing their people instead of checking boxes and living with their head buried in a screen? And to your point, enforcing some overly rigid process that some engineer built. Where is the development of business acumen and mentoring and relational skill and EQ and the things where you had great bosses like I did that built that into us? One of my fears for the younger generation, it's so weird that we are old now. We
speak for yourself.
Yeah, that's right. My friend who's senior. I don't see it, Andy. I think I'm not trying to hurt my business or yours, but some of the reason we have so much demand is because the managers in these roles are not developing their people, and the consequence is horrible. We have these amateur sellers in the field getting commoditized, getting outsold with the win rate you're talking about because no one has shown them this is how you do it. And whether it was my dad or bosses or managers or peers, I have story after story after story of top sellers who showed me what it's like and what they brought to the job. And today I don't see that. I see everything head down in the screen, CRM, and that's not helping. It's not helping at all.
Yeah, over the last couple weeks, I've been talking to several AAISP chapters about qualification, or about discovery, actually. And obviously qualification flows from it, but really about discovery. And, there's some very tactical things you can do in discovery that have an impact on your ability to win the deal. And it's this tactical smarts, right, that plays into winning business that seems to be, I don't want to say completely absent, but largely absent from the way people are being brought up and mentored, to your point. Is precisely. It's like, I go sort of chapter and verse, how you qualify people. I mean, there's some things I've taught that I learned that I've taught people that make a substantial difference in your ability to win a piece of business based on how you qualify, how you discover, how you do needs analysis. That just seems to be lacking. And so when you have I'm giving these talks, it's amazing. People writing these notes down. It's like, this is senior people writing the notes down because that's like, this is our 101 type stuff that we're just not educating people in.
Oh, that's awesome. It's funny. I know we're here to talk about my book, but I'm going to talk about your book, Amp Up Your Sales. What would happen? I think I might have even written this in an endorsement. What would happen if people implemented 20% of the sales process tips that are in Amp Up Your Sales? I mean, and I know Right. And there's no great rocket science in there, but it's exactly what has to happen to follow and execute and learn what you need to learn. So you speed up the deal. Right. I don't know who said it was Curlin or wherever I read it, Mahan Khalsa, like some, but the reality that sometimes to speed up the sale, you have to slow down the sales process and you do the right things along the way. And people are lazy or they're ignorant and they're looking for the shortcut. Right. And they're looking for the easy button and they think there's a hack. If I just do this thing, then everything will fall into place. But that doesn't exist in sales.
No. And I think this whole sort of hacking sales mentality is really oriented sort of top of funnel, which is problematic because it really, as you and I know, it's really at the beginning where you build those relationships that enable you to do things that you talk about in your book, like push back, right? The reason you're able to push back on a buyer, which, this is sort of a la the challenger, but it's more of a mindset as you talk about it, which I always had, which was, the customer's not always right. And also they're there to learn, just like we're there to learn, they're there to learn. And you're very rarely, in my experience, you run across somebody who's completely closed-minded, a buyer, about a better way to do something.
Oh, boy, that's really good. I'll tell you a story. I didn't tell this story in the book, but it's a story from my client, Teradata, and they're one of the few companies I talk about publicly because they've been public about our work together. And one of their senior executives shared with me one of the things they need to coach their sales force on more and more is pushing back on procurement. Because what's happened a few times when they sell one of their major solutions into a massive account, the types of accounts, we all know these names in the tech world, in the retail world, the banking world. Oftentimes, the actual client, the business person, right, who was over the line of business that needed this solution will come back to the Teradata supplier and say, why do we have this solution? Well, what is this? And they got to look and go, well, what you wanted, your procurement people didn't buy for you. What we went through the process and discovery and determined is what you needed for your solution. At the end of the day, when it got down to negotiating, your procurement people took all that crap out because they didn't want it. And it was just interesting where we can't let ourselves as professional sellers get in the position where our actual client who's counting on us to produce a really good outcome for them looks at us at the end of the day, wait a second, this isn't what I thought I was getting. And well, the problem is because we got run over by procurement who started pulling things out to get the pricing or the terms they wanted. Right? Yeah. So it's very, very tenuous situation. You can be really careful because I'm going to say this just, and I'll take the flames that come back my way. I posted something from my chapter about not falling into the procurement pit on LinkedIn. And I got some pushback from salespeople who said, I could never do that, Mike. If I push back, I'll lose. They won't like me. I don't have the guts or the rights. My company will kill me. And then a few procurement people commented and said, Mike, you have the wrong attitude here. You should stop trying to defeat us and work around us. You should collaborate with us to get the right kind of solution. We have a role here. And I get ideally what they're saying would be true. But in practice, that's not what I see. In 100% of the situations that I've been in, the procurement people are the enemy. And I don't want to collaborate with the enemy. I want to defeat them badly. I want to tell them to pound sand. And that's this. I tell three stories in the book.
That's right. Pound sand, yes.
Of my company and the two other small companies where salespeople are having a lot of success by holding their ground and they're confident. And instead of acquiescing to the prospect and to procurement, they're pushing back and they're dictating. And they're differentiating themselves and they're having more fun and they're selling bigger deals at higher margins and increasing their win rate because they're not rolling over and letting procurement steamroll them. So
yeah, oh, absolutely. And that was a good part of the book because I think the lesson for most salespeople is to take away from that. And I gave a webinar on this not that long ago. Is there's a way to procurement proof your negotiations, and it's through the trade-offs you do with the buyer. Your actual buyer, your customer.
That's good. Before
it shows up in procurement, because then when procurement goes back to the buyer and says, well, we're going to make this change, the buyer says, you can't do that because if they do that, they're going to reduce this, right? You want to lose the price? Well, they're going to lower the scope, and I can't do that in order to achieve my goals. And you can get it wrapped up really tightly so when it's delivered to procurement, they can't touch it because the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, and you're sophisticated. You're more sophisticated than I love hearing you talk about this. I need to go to one of your next webinars when you tackle this. So that's awesome.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, right? Is you do all that trade-offs, but this is what we're not teaching people, right? You do all that trade-offs before it gets to procurement. So it's just wrapped up, saran wrap, bulletproof, whatever you want to call it, and you can't touch it. I guess the Jenga maybe is the best
great
analogy. So,
yeah.
But I love what you're talking about, because and sellers don't feel enabled. And I think this comes also from, again, I'm going to put the blame on sales managers, is, I worked for people who enabled me to say no to them. And as a manager, you have to learn to accept that maybe your people have a better way of doing things.
Absolutely.
And let them develop.
Yeah, because you're not going to win every deal too, and there are times, and I've had this with clients, there are times when I'll push it, holding the line. And at the end, if I have to, I'll acquiesce and play the prospects game because it's too big a deal.
Sure.
And if I really feel like we're about to get cut out, I'll go. But I'm going to take it all the way to the limit, right?
Right.
And then I'll relent and do what they want. And then there are times I'm like, no, I'm going to push the nuclear button,
right?
And I'm going to risk blowing it all up because I don't think my chance of winning is high enough if I play their game. I have to play my own game. So I feel like I'm giving myself every opportunity. I've been saying it this way lately, and I like how this has come out. I have two missions. I'm speaking for myself, but I'm saying if any professional seller should have these missions. I have two missions. Number one, I want to win every deal I can, assuming that me winning is in the best interest of the prospect.
Right.
And number two is I want to produce the highest and best value for the client that's buying the service. So I want to win. I want them to the best outcome. If the process that's being offered to me by procurement or by the prospect doesn't allow me to either A, have the best chance of winning, or B, produce the best outcome from them, that's when I draw the line and go, no, I'm sorry, I hear you, but I'm not going to follow those instructions because that's not going to get you what you want, and I'm wasting time.
Right.
And it's amazing the respect. And I hope salespeople hear this, especially the highly relational, conflict-averse seller that's hearing this going, these guys have lost their freaking mind. There's no way I'm going to push back on these big companies. I'm telling you, when you do this well, especially if you laid the relational groundwork and you paid the relational rent with the key business people and the stakeholders in various areas of the client organization, it's amazing how much traction you actually have where you've got allies on your side that will push back for you because they know you're working to get them the outcome they need.
Right. But absolutely agree. And this goes back to a comment I said before, and maybe we just didn't really dig into it, is to enable your sellers to feel comfortable doing that. You have to enable them to feel comfortable telling you as a manager, pound sand. I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah,
because if you can't have both, right? If you want them to be compliant to you in the office, they're going to be compliant with the prospects.
Well, that's really profound the way you said that. I like that.
And it's really important. And so I had a reputation, and I mentioned this on the show. I had a boss finally come to me once. He said, "Don't you ever say yes to anything?" And I'd say no, because you can come to me with advice and say, or direction, say, do something this way. And if I look at that and say, if I do that, that's going to fail, then my butt's on the line. So I'd rather have my butt on the line doing things the way I think will have a greater chance of success. And so we have to enable our sellers to have that mindset, because then they can do exactly what you talked about, go to the customer and push back. And if we don't enable them inside, they're not going to happen outside.
Andy, you're energizing me. That is so good. And I'll just add this on top of that. What you're articulating, however, does require that management puts the right talent in the right seats, and we get the right people in the right roles, because the average salesperson at most companies I observe can't pull off what you just described, right? Because the business acumen, the experience, the talent, the gravitas, it's not there. So the manager can't trust them at the level you're advocating for. And that's really where it all comes together, right? If you're going to set people free and let them have that type of autonomy, you better have talent in the job and stop being cheap and silly. And you got to be really wise about job descriptions and who you're putting in those roles, right?
Well, but also you have to have that in the managers as well, because if we have managers that being brought into sales whose only vision of sales is as a metric-driven process, then they're never going to trust the people, right? They're going to trust the numbers. And so being able to build this trust, and this is, you wrote about this before, you've written about the metrics jockey, I think is your term, right? So, that's really, really important looking at it from the management standpoint. Do you have the people in the management roles who have enough experience in sales to trust the people to go out and execute?
All I can say, Andy, is that I wrote this really simple book, and this is the most complex, deep conversation I've had about it yet. So you're opening up like synapses in my mind that haven't fired in a while, and I like it.
Well, but
I like it a lot.
I always find that when I write a book and people ask me what the book is about, I say, I don't know. I haven't talked to enough people about it yet.
That's a great reply. Yeah. Because it's funny. I'm feeling the same way. Because, because you've done this a few times. You released the book. Yeah, you wrote it and you went through the editing process, and then you went through it again when it got proofed to check one more time and push back on the bad copy editing. And now I've read it once in real hardcover, and now I'm listening to the Audible, and I'm still learning about the book. And I honestly don't know until I start reading reviews. And everyone I talk to, I say, please do me a favor. Would you share your takeaways with me?
Yeah.
Tell me your top 3 or 4 things that you got, whether they're good or bad. I need to hear it because I'm with you. I don't know.
Yeah.
You think you know, but you don't until it gets absorbed by others. So that's the cool part.
I also just noticed that you play with your wedding ring while we talk the same way I do.
All the time.
I know. I've had mine off half the time we've been talking.
This 25 years, those of you who are listening, you can't see us. We're looking at each other on video. But this is my $90 gold comfort fit wedding ring from 1994. And my wife always sees me playing with it. She goes, "Are you sure that's the same one we bought?" I'm like, "Yes, I have not lost it." So
yeah, I'm always playing with mine too while we talk. So all right. So I wanted to... We're going to have to do another one of these because we're going to run out of time. But
it's great. This is so much fun.
But another part of the book that I thought was really interesting, which plays into a topic that I'm passionate about, is that you quote Ron Deleguy. I don't know how you pronounce his name.
Yep,
Deleguy. Okay.
I don't know either. I just took it in writing. I never heard it said before.
Okay.
Keep going. I like this.
Yeah. Hopefully Ron doesn't take offense. And the quote being is that 99% of all statistics only tell 49% of the story, which I wish it was that optimistic. I think it's way less than that. But we have this problem in sales, and it sort of speaks to a little bit of what you talk about in the book, but it really speaks to what all of us talk about, is there is no scientific data about sales, no scientific studies, longitudinal studies that says this crap works and that crap doesn't work, right? I mean, I'm as guilty as I write about what I know works, in my sphere of the people that I work with and so on. But fundamentally, it's still anecdotal, right? So what do we do? How do we get past this thing? Because
I don't know.
Because
I don't know, Andy.
I think it's a problem. I think that we have this. It's hard to enroll people in doing what we think are the right things because we can't point, other than a few customer successes, we can't really point to saying, and part of this is stemmed too from the fact that, we look at some of these seminal studies that have been done in behavioral economics, like Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. He starts the book off saying, I forget, was it priming or anchoring, settled science. And then he has to repudiate himself because, the studies can't be replicated. What do we do about this?
I don't know. It doesn't bother me. The anecdotal part doesn't bother me as much as it bothers you because you're smarter than me and you're looking for the solution.
I don't think so, but yeah,
I think so. And the reason that I have that quote in the book, in that chapter, is because of there's really one reason. It's the CEB Challenger Sale 57% statistic that got way too much play and got over manipulated and was used as a straw man statistic by so many manipulators and charlatans in our industry that wanted to tell you that because research said, this one study said, buyers get 57% through the buying process before engaging with a salesperson, which may or may not have been accurate. But it was with my own eyes, it wasn't, because that was not happening in clients where I was consulting and coaching, as we were going to pursue people before they were shopping. But what happened was that the jokers in our industry that wanted to tell you prospecting is dead, don't you dare bother pursuing somebody before they get this far down the path, because they're not going to talk to you anyway. That's where I feel like, wait a second, I have to disabuse people of this notion. And I think that's a myth. And now I was relieved when Serious Decision study came out later saying, no, let's debunk that. And then Mike Schultz from the Rain Group put out an awesome study. And he talked about, 82% of buyers accepting meetings early on. And half of those meetings being actually scheduled by traditional methods, telephone and email. So I really felt like I had to say, stop treating the 57% number as gospel, because it's hurting a lot of salespeople that are listening to the people manipulating the data. So that's my take on why I put that there. And I just wanted to push back.
But to your point, though, you just made is diverging just slightly. Is okay. So we now have, these through inside sales organizations, and we see it. Let's say specifically in SaaS. These high volume outbound operations going on. That there's some, it's so bought into that some people think that this is the only way that you can prospect in those industries, which to me, I don't agree with, right? I had a friend who, this was I don't know, 6-7 years ago, did a study with one client where they did, purely sort of the predictable revenue model prospecting, and they actually put a team of 3 people that worked as an account team, so doing more of an targeted account approach. And the targeted account approach far outperformed, the specialized prospecting and so on. So I know it's not necessarily replicable, parts due to the product size and complexity and so on, but have we bought in too much into this, hey, it has to be this way if you're selling a subscription-based product?
Right. Don't take this the wrong way, because you live in New York and California. I had this conversation with someone else. A lot of this information and a lot of this advice comes from the coasts. It comes out of Boston. It comes out of Silicon Valley. It's experts and sales elitists talking to tech companies and their sales force. So it's hard for me because I live, even though I'm from New York, I live in St. Louis, and I have clients all over the place. Mm-hmm. And in 90+% of the organizations I'm in, from big defense to big trucks to big data to distribution, these conversations don't happen because they don't have these highly defined roles and specialization. And I walk in some companies, they don't even know what a BDR is, right? Trish Bertuzzi's book is like what is the sales development playbook? I'm like, you need to read this. There's a disconnect, because I think a lot of the literature and a lot of the writing is talking specifically to the tech world, and the guys that work for distributorships that sell abrasives to manufacturing facilities in the upper Midwest have no idea what we're talking about when we get into those arguments. So that's where it's confusing for me. I don't even know if I'm the right person to speak to. Have we taken it too far in specialization? Because it's just confusing to me, honestly. In the companies I'm in, whether it's consulting or big defense or whatever it is, mortgages, insurance. I mean, it's all in every little, nook and cranny. The top salespeople are the ones that do their own prospecting. They may get some, there may be an inbound marketing effort. They may even have some type of sales development or inside group that helps a little bit warm the beachhead. But the top people, they own it all. They go, it's my funnel. If it's not full, it's on me. One guy I quoted in the book, he said this in a sales meeting. He says, listen, stop whining and bitching about the quality and the number of appointments the BDRs are creating. You should look at those as gravy, kind of like we look at Social Security as a percentage of our retirement income. Like if you count on it, you're screwed. Yeah. Let it be extra. So that my message is just, you got to own the whole funnel. It's yours. Don't point fingers. Don't blame the company. Don't blame marketing. And that's why, and be very careful about listening to the charlatans in the sales industry that tell you, don't pick up the phone. Do it all. Use social. Jeb Blunt says, use smoke signals. Use every appropriate ethical means necessary to get in front of somebody, to get that discovery meeting. So that's my take.
Well, I think that's right. Because I think that what people are not being mindful of is the fact that the pendulum swings, right? Nothing stays the same. And I have related before a conversation I had with a senior AE who I saw at a conference, was someone I'd known for a little while and had been working in SaaS business and was complaining to me that he said, you won't believe it, but they want me to prospect. And I said, well, okay, but let's look at this for a second. So, all right, you don't want to do this. He says, no. I said, okay, they want you to prospect. And on the other hand, is, in general, you're in this business, your close rate, your win rate's probably about 20%. Yeah. I said, okay, well, look at it from the perspective of an employer. I look at you and say, can't prospect, can't close.
Wow.
Right? I mean, if you can only win 20% of your business, in my book, you can't close. Right? And that's so funny that, in so many of these companies, they're hiring quote unquote closers and their win rate's at 20%. It's like, really? Okay.
It's really good. That really pauses you and makes you think, doesn't it? That's careful what you complain about.
Well, but also if you're positioning yourself that I do this, and believe me, at the beginning of my sales career, and it's 4 decades, I owe up to it.
You've earned it, yeah.
Faxes were new.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. Faxes were new.
I get it.
Things change. I mean, if you're not preparing yourself, hey, you're in the wrong business.
No, it's funny. When you talk about the guy complaining about being asked to prospect, it reminds me of something that I put in the book about selling at a higher price. I'm so tired. I don't know if you see this in your clients, but I'm so tired of salespeople whining and complaining that either A, they don't have the newest, latest, and greatest toy and tech that they're selling, like they're out featured by the competitor, or B, that our price is too high. And I hear salespeople actually say with a half a straight face, if our product was better and our price was lower, I would sell more. And I pause and I look back and I go, if our product was better and our price was lower, I wouldn't need you.
Mm-hmm.
And so be very careful, salespeople. And I take a kind of a different tack in the book and I go in jest, but for job security and income reasons, stop whining about your product and stop whining and bitching that our price is too high, because our job as professional sellers is to justify the difference between what we're charging, right, which at a premium, versus what the market is charging. If you can't articulate that value and make up for some price premium, then what do we need you for? We would just hang the thing on the internet and go, hey, we got low price crap. We're Walmart. Come on in. So be careful. Be careful about the sales guy complaining he doesn't want to prospect. Be careful complaining that we have a bad product. Be careful complaining that we're priced too high. Your job is to create revenue. So do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to improve upon that. But you look at each step of the process through the way to sit. Again, from these conversations I had recently with groups about discovery, is I said, if you're going into discovery and just doing these scripted questions that your management team or your marketing team gives you, I can get a bot to do that. If you can't ask a question that unveils some insight about what the outcomes the customer wants to achieve, why do I need you? Right? Same thing. It applies throughout the entire selling. All right.
Beautiful.
Mike, unfortunately, we're out of time, but we're going to have to do this again. It's been way too long. We should do this again shortly, because
I love talking to you. You energize me and you teach me, and this is fun. So thanks for that.
Well, I learned from you, and we didn't get to the parts of the book that I wanted to also talk about. We had some very strong tactical advice for people. One bit of advice about how to get a meeting with people I thought was just genius, which
they can go find it in the book. How's that? That's a great teaser.
It's a great teaser. Go find it in the book, and but we'll have you back. So tell people a little bit about the book and how they connect with you then.
Yeah, the book is Sales Truth, and it's off to a flying start.
As it should be.
Yeah, you can check it out at your favorite book reseller, and obviously I'd like you to read the reviews on Amazon to get a feel for what the book is about. You can find me at mikeweinberg.com, or follow me on different social channels at Mike_Weinberg. Weinberg.
Perfect. Mike, a pleasure, as always.
Thank you, Mr. Paul.
All right, we'll do it again shortly.
Okay, friends, that's it for this archive episode of Sales Enablement. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank Mike Weinberg for sharing his wisdom with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could also leave us a rating or review, let us know how we're doing. We'd appreciate that as well. So thank you for your help. And thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.